Welcome to another episode of the Destination Linux podcast.
Welcome to episode 82 of Destination Linux. My name is Ryan, and with me here today are two beautiful people. Beautiful people. Michael is here. Michael, what have you been up to this week, my friend?
Quite a lot of stuff. I've been doing a little bit of extreme distro hopping, and
Whoa, that's unlike you.
It is very much unlike me. And I also did some, readjusting for the overlays and all kinds of stuff for the Destination Linux video form on YouTube. And quite a few things. And
But you said extreme distro hopping.
Yeah.
So, what distros did you try? Because you're known as the KDE guy. I want to know if you cheated.
Okay, one, I did some testing for other distros, but that wasn't a part of the extreme. That was a part of a different computer, and the extreme distro hopping was for the setup of today's recording. I have a laptop that I extreme distro hopped to Ubuntu about like an hour before I started doing some recording stuff.
Nice.
So, yeah, Ubuntu 18.04.1.
There you go. Well, we're going to talk about some 18.04.1 news coming up. And Zeb, what have you been up to, my friend?
Hiya. Well, I've been putting my machine back together after having tried Team Red.
And you loved Team Red, right?
Whilst I was super excited to try it, it wasn't for me, or I expected too much of it.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll try a GTX 1080 when the GTX 1100 series comes out, because I'm hoping the price drops. So what I've been doing is I've been busy reinstalling my distros, setting you up a special wallpaper because I know you love NVIDIA.
Such a shame.
Oh, and I still haven't fitted me IC dock.
You still? What? How long is that IC dock sat in a box? It's been like at least a month now.
Hang on. It's out of the box.
Oh, wow. Well,
Step one.
Geez.
Step one.
Yeah.
Step one. Step two is I think I've lost the screws.
So I have a video that shows you how to install it, Zeb. It's real easy. You slide it into a 5 1/4 bay.
Yeah. Well, you guys need screws
both
though.
Sides of the. Oh no, it's confused. I've got to use a screwdriver and everything.
Yeah, you need a special modified screwdriver that has a Phillips head, and those are rare.
And one that's magnetic, because I always drop stuff, and I don't want it dropping in the bottom of the computer. Yeah.
That is a good idea with those tiny screws. That's a good idea.
Yeah, magnets and computers have always gone together well.
Really well.
Well,
together.
the magnet is attached to the screwdriver, and you just don't put the screw in the CPU or the screwdriver in the CPU, and you should be good.
You're doing it wrong. You get a big electromagnetic magnet, and you stick it next to your computer, and you turn it on, and then it sucks all the screws out of the case. That's
right.
The spark that jumped out of the Vega 64. That's why it didn't work.
Exactly.
It could be. That's how you turbocharge your computer.
Right. I thought that was kickstarting it like the old bike,
Love it. All right, Zeb. Well, we also got an email this week that I absolutely loved, and it's so good that really it's worthy of just reading it verbatim here from Cubicle Nate. What does he got to say?
Well, it's fantastic. First of all, he says, "Greetings. I just wanted to throw you a quick note about some really good news and great uses on Linux. I'm a drafter designer by trade and have only been using proprietary software on Windows to do 3D mechanical design work. I have recently been using FreeCAD, which is a 3D parametric solid modeler, not too different from the high-cost commercial offerings. It is feature-rich and has many models for different engineering functions. This has been an exciting journey and discovery for me. I have only begun scratching the surface of it, and the more I use it, the more I like it. Some other noteworthy built-in modules include BIM, Building Information Modeler, for doing architectural work, and FEM, Finite Element Method, for doing some serious part or systems analysis even. God, this is a technical document. I knew I should never have read it. From a professional and personal standpoint, this is super exciting to know that I am now free of the confinements of super expensive proprietary software for hobby projects. These are cross-platform tools, not exclusive to Linux, but the point is it is on Linux and it works super well.
Nice.
And the fact that he can now do all of his stuff that he wants to do on Linux is just awesome.
Yeah. What I love about this is last week we had talked to one of our patrons, Wendy, and her photography that she's doing exclusively in Linux. And this email is an individual who's a drafter and designer who's doing their work exclusively in Linux, which I think is really exciting because sometimes we just talk about the desktops and all the things in the desktops. So people were able to run their business off of Linux and make their living off of Linux and do these very advanced techniques and utilize these tools to get this work done. And it just reminded me of the time, even though I have no relation to using FreeCAD and all of those, but I did dabble in the 3D printer world for a short while and used a program called Cura. But there are so many programs that were available in Linux to start utilizing the 3D printer. And I thought that was just absolutely amazing as soon as I got it. Of course, I just happened to be given it as a gift. It was a beautiful gift, but unfortunately, it was a really bad knockoff model that didn't work very well. So not the software's fault, totally the hardware fault, but interesting nonetheless.
Oh yeah, 3D printing is a really cool thing. I wish I had a 3D printer to mess with it. But if for those who are interested in doing 3D printing, you could check out your local Linux user group or local hackerspace because there's spaces like that have 3D printers that people can just come in and kind of book to use it, and you could create stuff based on models that they have and things like that. So you can play with it that way.
So this is a call out to all of the folks who email us. We get beautiful emails like this. We try to respond to them, but also if they're good enough, we like to bring them into the show itself. So we're asking the question this week, how do you use Linux? Send us an email on how you use Linux and applications that you found to accomplish that work. Comments at destinationlinux.org, and your email may be featured on the show because we definitely want to highlight that type of stuff more and more.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So on to the news. Michael, you kind of let the cat out of the bag here, but Ubuntu, this is exciting. Everyone hold on. Ubuntu has their first point release, 18.04.1 LTS, and also 16.04.5 got its LTS release. So why does this matter? Why is this a big deal, Michael?
Well, okay, for one, it's good that they have it's a maintenance thing and they are making a lot of bug fixes and things like that. So there's a lot of under the hood stuff that is fixed, and it's important to have that as far as also the hardware enablement stacks are getting updates for the kernels and things like that. But probably the main thing that's really interesting about it, not really interesting, but good to know, is that if you are a Ubuntu 16.04 user for the LTS and you like to use LTS to LTS, this is the first version that Ubuntu says you can upgrade from. You can technically you could have technically upgraded from as soon as 18.04 came out, but they didn't suggest it because they didn't do enough testing and they didn't have all the things ready to do it. And now with this version, with the first point release, you can do it. And that's how typically all LTS releases, they wait for the point release for the upgrades.
Well, so because I distro hop so much and never stay on long enough to migrate,
you are
I assume
perfectly
the
fine.
command is your sudo apt-get dist upgrade. Is that the command you would use to upgrade your distro to?
Well, Ubuntu is a different thing because they have the Ubuntu update manager. So it's update manager is the one that does everything for you because distro the dist upgrade for apt doesn't take into considerations the things that turning off PPAs and things like that. So the update manager covers those things. So it'll turn it off and you can go back in and turn it back on when you have it converted. And
it takes an awful lot longer than a normal apt dist upgrade would do. That's just generally pulling all of the new bits and pieces in to Ubuntu or whatever it is you're doing it on. The actual upgrade from session to session is probably going to bring in something like 1,500 items and can probably take, I don't know, about 40 minutes to complete, give or take.
Yeah.
I know it's quite a long process that we're not really used to in the Linux world. We're normally sort of bish bash bosh on the terminal, done, let's move on to the next thing. This does actually take some time, but it's very interesting to see what it's doing and wiping this bit in and bringing in the new bits and asking you to turn off all sorts of stuff. I've done it a couple of times and yeah, it's good stuff.
So, Zeb, besides the fact that you have that heinous-looking wallpaper behind you, you also mentioned that you upgraded to Ubuntu 18.04.1 when this news hit. So how do you like it? It looks like both of you jumped to Ubuntu.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been using Ubuntu since the first alpha when I heard that it was coming out, and it was rock solid from day one, and I followed it through to the alpha to the release. So I was really interested in putting the 4.1, release to the test to see if it performed as well as the original Ubuntu. And I have to say, it's sterling. It's exactly the same, rock solid. Everything works out of the box. Everything looks good out of the box. And I've not had a single problem with it. It's a lovely distribution.
Yeah, it's the best Ubuntu release ever, I think. I've only started, I guess it would have been back with 16. But the typical issues that I experienced when I was on NVIDIA and had KDE Plasma Desktop were always there. And then 18 dropped and all of that went away. No more artifacting, no more of the menu issues that I was having. The team there in Ubuntu 18, and we've said it before, this is the best work they've ever done, in my opinion, which is what you expect to see.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a completely unbiased opinion on my part as well. It's the best version of Ubuntu ever. Asterisk, I contributed to this version of Ubuntu. So anyway, this is actually what I switched to it to test out some stuff, but also I knew I had maybe 30 minutes to get something ready that I could rely on and it would work what I wanted to do. So I chose Ubuntu 18.04.1, and then it worked perfectly. So, speaking of KDE Plasma, because of course we could continue to talk about that. The KDE on their blog post, they posted a new blog article about the engineering of Plasma, and what's really cool about this one is that it's like, this is something that they've kind of explained, but never really clarified exactly how it works. And they go through like a lot of detail to explain the difference between like what the KWin and Plasma are doing and things like that. So this is a really cool article because they explain like the difference between the Plasma extensions. And one of the things this is a side note, the extensions is a term that they could really pick what to call it, because it's like extensions, plasmoids, widgets, like just pick something. Anyway.
You mean there's a naming issue in Linux? That never happens.
Well, it's the problem is that they all mean the same thing. It's just like or sometimes I call them plugins too. It's like just pick something and just go with it.
So the whole idea here is that they're separating these out so that in GNOME recently, what I've had an issue with is if something goes bad, the entire GNOME session will lock up. And I've never experienced that in any other Linux desktop environment, period. It was the only one. I like GNOME. I've enjoyed my time there, but that was very frustrating. In this, the way they're basically doing the architecture for the shell UI extensions, they're making it so essentially they're not interconnected, so they wouldn't crash your session even more so than before, because I don't remember that being an issue.
Well, so they're making it better. So like what you're saying is right. They're making the extensions to be separate. So like kind of they are now, but they're sort of not. So the reason is because the compositor that handles all the windows, which is KWin or Quinn or whatever, that handles all the windows. So if your Plasma desktop crashes or something, the windows are still fine, or the applications are still fine, and the same thing and vice versa. So they have it separated right now so that the Plasma shell and the compositor and window manager is all separate, but they currently have the extensions that are integrated and connected to the Plasma shell. So this would be making it so that the extensions could be separated from the Plasma shell also, so they have like 3 different components. So like they haven't said exactly if each extension is going to have its own process or anything, but by separating it from the Plasma shell, it allows it so like the Plasma shell could break, but it could come back in like 2 seconds because all the extensions are still good. So things like that. One of the things that I think is really cool is that they're also talking about having a separate. Actually, I think they are going to have a separate process for the extensions because they did talk about having sandboxing. So in theory, you could install a new extension and have it sandbox to itself and not affect any other extensions. So that would be amazing.
So tell me, is this a pure technical article, or would the average user get a better understanding of how his system sort of hangs together? Would they be able to survive the first 2 paragraphs, or would they be yawning, heading for bed?
It's like a 50-50 really.
Mhm.
It's there's a little bit of technical aspects to it. Okay, there's quite a bit of technical aspects to it, but there's it is somewhat like they do kind of like take it down. So it's like a very technical topic that's not presented technically. So I guess that's how to say it, because it is
yeah,
very
they
technical.
put a nice graphic in here. The graphic makes sense to me. The general idea of it is the architecture discussed above shields applications in the compositor from the shell UI extensions, but it doesn't shield the shell. We want to fix that next. So they're just doing more work basically to separate these items out so that they don't end up causing major issues, right? Between each other.
They
And
already
that-
don't really make issues, but they're just going to make it even better.
And ultimately, that's always going to be good for the end user, because you don't want it to become like a Windows where you start getting used to crashing. Like it's so funny, on my work environment, we have to use Windows. And just this week, it was Friday, I was working, and some of the applications I were using were getting memory issues and just crashing and hanging up. And it became such a foreign thing because I've been using Linux now for so long at a desktop. Before, I would have just reopened the app and not even thought twice about it. It's like, oh, I'm in Windows, this stuff's going to crash. But now it's kind of like, it's shocking. It's like, oh my gosh, this is taking down everything. And then sometimes you have to reboot the entire machine just to get it back to restore. And basically this work that they're doing in KDE constantly being kind of on the cutting edge, sometimes to the good, sometimes to the bad, are pushing kind of this containerized. In my opinion, in my limited knowledge, it looked more like containerizing things to keep stuff from being able to have major impacts if they fail, and separating them out, which also generally creates more security enhancements or possibilities out there as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much what it is, and it also has the bit. It has the security aspects, but the stability is the most important thing. It just shows you that the KDE team are putting a lot of effort into making sure that everything that they produce has like the most stability as possible. And even when they already have a pretty solid system or distribution desktop environment, they're still putting more effort to make it even better. So that's great.
Nice.
So from one very technical document to another very technical side of Linux, and that is the fact that Linus Torvalds announced over the weekend the 7th and last release candidate for the Linux 4.18 kernel. Now, normally this sort of stuff is like, oh, really, yawn, it just worked. Come on, what do I need to know about that for? But it's actually quite interesting this week because, Ryan, they've got some news.
Oh my gosh. See, I'm trying to keep you, that team green behind you is bothering me, and I'm trying to keep you from going to that 1080 because I get the Vega didn't quite work for you. And even in my reviews, I talked about, look, it's comparable, the Vega 64 to the 1080, probably not the 1080 Ti. And the fact is it came out later than the 1080, so it should be a better performer. It's not. It's at least on par, and there are some advantage it has, like being able to just use a Mesa driver and those type of things. But I get why you weren't satisfied with it. You had a different card than me, had some other issues as well, potentially. But the reason why I want you to hold out is because in this latest kernel, and this is what I love about Linux, when I talk about running Linux on the latest and greatest hardware, they're already preparing for GPUs that haven't even launched yet. They're supposed to be announced this year. They're the Radeon Vega 20 GPUs. This is so exciting because I think this is going to be the moment where AMD has, in my opinion, dominated and created a better CPU than Intel for the first time in forever. And now you have the Vega 20 GPUs. And the reason why this matters so much is the Vega 20s are going to be based on 7 nanometer technology, which essentially, to break that down into the easiest terms possible, the smaller that is, the faster it can get data back and forth. There's nothing that I know of right now, I don't think, that's on that type of architecture, that small of an architecture. And these things are probably just going to soar. I say probably because I don't have one yet, although if AMD will send me one, I'd be happy to test it.
Yes.
So there are many things within this kernel, but that one really stuck out to me because now instead of new hardware dropping and then we wait to catch up to it, Linux now has in its kernel hardware that hasn't even been released yet, but it's ready for it when it drops. That is awesome.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's one of the things I love the fact that AMD is becoming much more open and integrating to the kernel as well. There's Intel has been doing that a little bit, but to have you know a manufacturer of the high end hardcore type hardware is like much more interesting than. Well, I mean, it's not much more. Okay, it's much more interesting to me. So let's go with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, in this, you get USB Type-C and 3.2, better support for those connections, official support for Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 ARM chips, which I thought was interesting as well. And also variants for the Spectre, of course, mitigations and things like that. But you can see there's a lot of work. ARM is a massive beast of a company, and they are producing just endless devices. Most phones run on an ARM architecture, but endless devices out there with ARM chips. They are arming them with ARM chips. And so seeing that support within Linux as well makes a ton of sense for me, because they're a company that not a lot of people talk about, but a lot of people are probably using ARM processors somewhere. One way or another.
Almost guaranteed if you have a phone. If you have a smartphone, you're almost guaranteed to have one.
I just used an ARM processor a moment ago as well.
Was that a wine bottle, Zeb?
So, an ARM bottle. Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right. So next in the news, though, we have the return of Korora 28.
Fantastic.
So the reason why Wendy mentioned this article in our Telegram group, that anybody can join, by the way, you don't have to be a patron to join that, but you can join our Telegram group. And Wendy dropped this article in here about Korora 28 coming back. And as you know, they kind of took a pause for a while, but the community wants it to return, and the community always gets what it wants. But the most interesting thing to me about this is when I went Team Red there with Fedora, I noticed that a lot of people were telling me you need to check out Korora. And of course, as my timing would always have it, that's when they put a pause on the entire project.
Yep.
So I never got to play with it, but now it's kind of back, Michael.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm so glad it came back, because Korora was like one of the reasons that when I did use Fedora, I always went with Korora, because they added an extra bit of polish and give you access to different repositories that you didn't previously have access to unless you knew that they existed. But with Korora, you get them immediately, and that's just awesome. So I'm really happy to see them coming back with this. Do you know if the maintainer of the original project is still involved, or is it like a community taking over thing?
I think it's the community taking over, but I did hear some rumor of that he can make himself available if they get stuck. He just doesn't want to do it full time.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's good. I mean, it's being just contributing in general. That's great. I mean, I was just curious that I hadn't heard about it yet, but yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah. Now, one of the things they do need to try and fix, which is why I didn't attempt to use this before, or rather, I should say, I did attempt to use it, but it suffers from the old Fedora problem of if you don't allow it to format your EUFI part or your EFI boot partition, it says you haven't got one. And at that time, I wasn't prepared to do that because I only had the one EFI and it had all of my other distros installed. But what I've done now with my SSDs on my setup is I've given each individual SSD its own potential for it to have an EFI boot partition. And now I can put a Korora on it, and the worst that's going to happen is it will just chew up one partition. It's not going to ruin the rest of my setups. So I'm going to look forward to using this because I had heard really good things about it before.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in seeing what your experience is for that, because if it does, having the separate EFIs, that would be really interesting to see what that happens.
Yeah, now right now it's just XFCE, so that's the only desktop environment, although they're working and bringing other desktops. Obviously, XFCE being the best, it's the most important to get done first. So I'm very happy to see that as well. And it is beautiful. I played with it in a virtual box. I haven't done a full install of it yet, and it looked gorgeous. I mean, couldn't see any issues blatantly. Of course, VirtualBox isn't a fair comparison. I want to see it actually on hardware, but in the VirtualBox, some of them fail during that test, and that's really bad. It looked very beautiful and very simple to use and figure out, and like they had tied it all together really well for being a community project that they're kind of reviving here. So I think that's awesome. I love to see that.
Yeah. So hopefully they'll add the best desktop environment, KDE Plasma, to the next version as well. But something that's being added to Firefox, which is really good, is they're now going to be having out-of-process extensions being for the Linux version of Firefox, and that's coming in Firefox 63.
So you love Firefox, Michael. You've been a proponent of it. You got me to switch, which was a smart move to come to Firefox. But I really kind of got stuck here at a moment. I'm like, this guy loves Firefox so much, but this feature actually has been with Mac OS and Windows for a long time, apparently.
So the next topic on the show is...
So does Mozilla really like Linux or what? Why don't we get the features the same time as everybody else?
I have no idea. I can't answer that one at all.
Mark a note on a calendar. Michael stumped.
Yes, I stumped him finally.
So, okay. Firefox is the best browser, but it is unfortunate that they didn't have this until now. But it is good that they do have it, so that's,
Well, this isn't like a little feature. This isn't like, here's something to allow you to view pictures in a gallery. Like, this is basically taking the extensions, again, like we were talking about earlier with the Plasma team and what they're doing. But this is in the browser. They're taking those extensions and they're basically breaking them out into their own dedicated processes, which means they're no longer going to crash your browser if the extension fails, which is a really great thing. And it also adds some security in containerizing those extensions. So this is a big deal. You would think you would put this in Linux first. We're the ones who... listen, Windows only adopted security. We were born in it with
That's
Linux.
right.
All right.
That's right. That's right. But to be clear, the electrolysis system had separation between the main core and the tabs. This is now giving it so like your extensions can take advantage of the electrolysis system. So it's kind of there. You already had majority of the separation that Chrome does, but now it's even better. So that's going to make it more reliable for the extensions and have extra security to it. But I think there's some issues is that some of the extensions might need to be rebuilt if they weren't paid, if they're haven't been updated in a while. That might need to be taken into consideration for that. But what's really cool about it is that it will be on by default for all extensions when the next release when that particular release comes out.
So we're now going to get the complete picture, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean. Okay, so Firefox is great.
Yeah, you just keep saying that, but I'm telling you right now, we have a lot of very important people that listen to this show. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to embarrass them, but very, very important people. Firefox, Mozilla, you are officially on notice. If we don't get a feature at the same time as Windows and Mac OS that's security related next time, I might be singing at an opera, if you know what I mean. Opera browser. That's what I mean.
Listening to some Vivaldi music? Is that what you're saying?
Vivaldi, yeah, I'm going to be listening to some Vivaldi music.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of browsers, this one's not my favorite, but it is Zeb's. Google Chrome.
Yeah, works for me.
Google Chrome. If you don't like security and you don't like privacy, Google Chrome has a new beta out there, or developer version if you want, which has picture-in-picture mode. So why do we care about this? Zeb, is this some feature you think you'll use?
Well, I read about it and I thought, well, what I normally do is I just hive off the tab anyway. So if I'm watching a YouTube video, I'll grab that tab, pull it up to the right-hand corner, make it small so it just shows the video, and then carry on reading what I was reading. So to have the ability to actually go, no, I'll just pop out that video window. Interesting, but for me, it's a bit like television picture in pictures. Did it ever really take off, or was it just a gadget?
Does anybody use that feature? Because this is the dumbest feature ever. Like, I have it on my TV, and I'm like, I turned it on, and for like 3 seconds, I'm like, look, honey, look how cool this is. Yeah. She's like, put it back to my show, and that was the end of picture in picture.
Yeah, and it's like, hey, don't you want to watch this other thing, maybe, that's small and it's not worth it?
Well, I've also got it on my monitor because I can connect up to 4 different devices, and I could have 4 different outputs. But if I suddenly decide to have the Xbox in the bottom right-hand corner, I've now only got 3/4 of my monitor around the side, and whatever was happening in the bottom right, I now can't see it because my Xbox is there. So I just, it's a feature it's gimmicky. It looks flash, but does anybody really use it? I don't think so. So I think this might fall in the same vein, unless one of you guys can convince me.
I think it's a bit of a damp squid.
Wow. Wow, you really went there. So, Yannick in chat mentions that NASCAR races and IndyCar races at the same time. I could see this being useful for sports. And since, oh my gosh, I accidentally showed my pink pencil. I could see this for sports, being used for sports, potentially for those who watch, sports on their computers, I guess, if they had like PlayStation View, where you can watch TV through your browser, and then you could pull out, I guess, multiple windows.
While you're saying, like, in the verses between like having it just taking the tab out, like Zeb said, this is what I do, and then rather than care about this, like I guess it's nice for some people for a novelty maybe, but I think it's gonna be the same thing that Zeb said. Is just gonna be like, or I mean, also what you said, you just look at it for 3 minutes and you're done. Yeah, it's about that.
But having said that, I bet you, Ryan, in a couple of months' time, Firefox offer it as well.
After they do it for Windows, yeah.
Okay, since you're going to bring up Firefox, already had it.
Actually, yes. I'm glad you used the word "had" because you told me last week that Firefox has it as an extension.
No, I said it had it. Technically, I said it had it.
You may have. I didn't pay attention, so I went and researched and I found it. It's called PIP, and it's not compatible with Quantum.
Oh no, that's a different thing. That's good, but that was like back in the day. But I'm talking about like there's one that's called Minvid, and it's MINVID. However, it's also a had it because it was a test pilot experiment that Mozilla did, and I don't think you can still get it.
Zeb, I might be joining you on Team Chrome here.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, this is like anyway.
So yeah, talking of Chrome, we've also got the partner browser Chromium, and along with Opera, Canonical have advised that they are now going to be available as snaps. Now, this news met me with my usual, another snap that I can get out of the repositories anyway. But then you brought up a very good point, Ryan, as to where you would use something like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, on this show, for instance, or even when I'm doing my own show, on YouTube, I like to have a separate browser than what I use as my personal browser open, because I don't want all the tabs. If I'm looking on Amazon for something for the family or whatever, I don't want all those recommendations and all that stuff showing up when I'm recording a show. Also, there are times where I need to have multiple browsers open at the same time, regardless of what's on them, and having, say, my go-to Firefox and then having Opera in a snap or Chromium in a snap that I can pop up as my secondary browser. Very, very useful for me, or a way that, I could see being able to utilize this. Now, I have in my install script out on GitHub the ability, it installs Opera, and you'll see that it was a little bit of a task of pulling down the files and being able to build that package out before. Now I can literally change all of that script, remove it out there, and just snap install Opera. Which means it's always going to grab the latest version, which is nice, and makes it much more easier to maintain that code for the GUI installer that I have out there. So multiple use cases and for me that I could get out of this.
Yeah, it's really good. And I do the same thing where I have like multiple browsers that are all separate. So I, like for example, I use Vivaldi as my secondary because it doesn't have anything custom in it. It's just I just need a browser that I could display. And not have to have all my stuff associated. You could also go the second route of getting another computer and just doing that. So you have one computer that only has this one purpose, is showing stuff that's nothing in there.
Yeah, get another computer. Just jump right off that fiscal cliff.
Yeah, of course. But there's one thing you could say. There's one, like, because Firefox is also a snap, you could have your snap and your deb separate, so you could have both and still use Firefox for everything. That's a great option.
Wow. Only if they give us the updates at the same time will I do that. You're on notice, Firefox.
Well, it's a snap, so you might get some good updates on that pretty quick. So let's go with that. Speaking of something that's coming out of the rumor mill, essentially, there's a possibility that Windows 10 may be going bye-bye, and replacing it would be a desktop as a service, where you pay a subscription fee to use your machine.
I love this idea. I encourage Microsoft to continue with this plan. I think it's brilliant. I am so
Yes,
excited
it
for
is
it.
the best option they could possibly give us. Yes.
Exactly. It's the greatest gift that we'll keep on giving. So I first saw this in the Computer World article that they were talking about this, but this is why it's caught attention. So people may not realize that if you are dealing with Windows licenses on an enterprise, this is already a thing. So enterprise versions of Windows, you already can buy this basically desktop as a service offering and interact with their Office 365 offering. Now, the idea that I'm actually hearing from after this person broke this news, and Michael, you did the right thing by saying kind of a rumor, but one of the things that seems to not be a rumor or more people are grabbing onto is the fact that Windows is in fact going to be selling a bundle with their Surface lineup. So you would be buying the Surface, and then with that, it's going to come a bundle of a desktop as a service, including Office 365 and Windows 10 licensing, I guess, bundled together, that you would pay one fee for and keep upgrading those. And then if you have support issues, well, I guess Windows manages the updates at that point. And then if you have support issues, you have ability to reach out to them. So the question is, are they going to push everyone towards this model in their future desktop, which would be creating, basically operating system suicide and befalling all those new users right into our Linuxy hands?
I'm okay with it. Do it. I encourage Microsoft to go through this route. It's the best option I've heard them talk about in a long time.
I mean, I can almost understand it, especially when you talked about their Microsoft Surface Book thing. If they were to do it a bit like Samsung's, give us £30 a month and you can have a brand new phone every year, so just send us the old one back. If they did something similar for you with the actual Surface machine, so every year you got the newest and latest and greatest machine for your monthly fee of, I don't know, $50 a month or something, then that might make sense. But for you to have to go out and pay $1,000 for this Microsoft Surface, and then what is it, about $20 a month for 365?
Yeah,
I've never really looked at it. And then it's going to be a minimum of $20 a month for Windows, I would have thought. That's an awful lot of money just to churn out every year, and you're not going to get a new piece of kit. So, yeah, I think if they do go this route, they will fall flat on their face. And I never thought I'd say that about Windows because they're just too big. But
keep in mind, it's a situation where when people think a company, well, Microsoft will never do that. Let's take a look at the Xbox. If the Xbox 360 owned gaming, and I know not everybody's into gaming, but hear me out here because this has a point, I think. The Xbox 360 owned gaming. It was way more popular than the PlayStation. It completely dominated the PlayStation. Everybody had an Xbox 360. It was considered the best console at that time. Then it came time for the Xbox One and the PS4. So PS4 comes out and it's kind of blasé. Nobody seems to care about it. Everybody's still talking about Xbox right up into the moment that they announce that they're only going to have digital games. Do you guys remember this? They're only going to sell digital games. Nobody can buy a physical disc anymore. And so they go out full press and say, this is what we're doing, deal with it. I think they even said deal with it to somebody on a Twitter thing, if I recall directly, and we're pushing it. The market fought back so hard that they finally had to basically re-engineer the operating system right before launch, which turned out to be a disaster because it wasn't working correctly, and try to put a disk reader in here and give physical access to the disk, because obviously what happened is GameStop revolted against them and other companies that's entire business model are based on this. Now, I found that kind of interesting because we're all on, a lot of us are utilize Steam and we only have digital, or only use digital offerings for gaming, and Microsoft was just kind of like taking that and running with it a little. But they are not afraid, what I'm getting at, to shoot themselves in the foot multiple times. And I could see Windows testing this out with the Surface and eventually pushing it towards the other models, because now they're tying your license to your Microsoft login ID. And so that's kind of the first step that you would start to do if you were getting a monthly service, getting ready for a monthly, a yearly or monthly plan in there. So it could happen, and I would love to see it happen.
Yeah. But you also mentioned something where Stephen summed up his article, and you thought it was quite a sort of like not cognizance, not the right word, but quite a thought-provoking sentence that he finished up with. What was it that he said?
He said, I'm not happy with this development. I'm old enough to remember the PC revolution. We went from depending on mainframes and Unix boxes for computing power to having the real power on our desktops. It was liberating. Now Microsoft, which helped lead that revolution, is trying to return us to that old centralized control model. Fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. It sounds kind of pretty much what they want to do, yeah.
Yeah.
Which they should do it. Ruin your system.
Please.
Well, talking about people who will do their own thing regardless, there's a new crowdfunding that's just gone live for the GPD Pocket 2. Now, this is a nice little 7-inch portable laptop, and it's launched a crowdfunding campaign for a second version. So this niche mini laptop has some interesting use cases and is a great travel buddy. But this time round, there's no Linux support.
You're dead to me.
So what happened to all of those people who went out and supported and helped them get the GDP Pocket 1? Okay, I know they've now got their little tool, but surely they were thinking, okay, yeah, we'll do the 2 when it comes out and we'll get an even better. No, sorry, boys. Windows only, is it?
Well, the GPD Pocket is an interesting situation because when they first announced the first Indiegogo campaign, they didn't even have a working model. Like, they had, 3D renderings and stuff. So the fact that they actually created something that legitimately became, a decent device, it's ridiculously expensive for the tiny little thing it is, but I actually got to use it for about 15, 20 minutes once and at a conference, and it was really fun and surprisingly good to type on. It was still a tiny keyboard, but surprisingly usable while still being a tiny keyboard. And the first time I used it, I got maybe 2%, 2% error rate for typing. So it's actually not bad. But I think the problem with it was when they made the GPD Pocket 1, they made the Ubuntu version and the Windows version. But the Windows version had more powerful hardware and more RAM. So there was no reason to get the Ubuntu version because they kind of made it less incentive. You're going to spend
less appealing, right?
Yeah, if you're going to spend hundreds of dollars and the difference between one and the other is $60, well, you're just going to get the other one because it's more powerful. Why wouldn't you? And then the people who wanted to have it, the person I talked to who let me borrow play with their GPD Pocket at the conference, told me they got the Windows version because it was more powerful and they just put Linux on it. So I think the vast majority of people who wanted to do Linux would also be, aware of that problem and just get the Windows version. So maybe the GPD Pocket looked at it as people didn't want the Ubuntu version or whatever, the Linux version, but maybe they just didn't take into consideration that why would someone pay $500 for an inferior of their own product?
Well, that's where I was going to go with my next section, because it talks about it's only a 7-inch screen, but it's got a 1920 by 1200 touchscreen, an Intel Core i3 mobile Cable 8 processor, 4 gig of RAM, 128 gigabyte eMMC5 hard disk, I guess, for $529.
Yep.
Who's going to spend that money on that? I mean, apart from Mr. Gadget over here.
I find it listen, if they had put Linux on it and had a Linux model, I would be interested, even paying, although I think for the specs and what it is, now some people who travel a lot, I could see this being very nice to be able to stick in a pocket of a laptop bag. For instance, I always have to bring my work computer with me. But I also want to bring a personal computer that I do personal stuff on because I don't mix the two. I don't do anything personal on my work computer. So having a little laptop that I could throw in there quickly would be a great thing to have. At $529 with 4 gigabytes of RAM, which to me, the minimum right now is 8. I know you can do things on 4, but I just have to have 8 for everything that I run to really feel like the operating system and everything is snappy with what I'm doing, whether it's using GIMP or other things. When you got 4 gigs, it just really starts to take a toll on the system in my experience. So I need 8 gigabytes of RAM. When I look at this and the fact that they're not supporting Linux now, so I'm not going to give them more money than what they're worth. I'm going to evaluate them on the hardware they're giving. Frankly, I would rather have a Microsoft Surface Go. The Surface Go that was just announced is about the exact same price. And it has a way more beautiful screen at 1800 by 1200 IPS technology. You get the Pentium Kaby Lake processor. You get 8 gigabytes of RAM. You have something that you can also take Windows off and put Linux on it so it actually runs correctly, which would be the same thing that I would have to do with this GPD. So I would go with the Go if I had to choose between the two, and I think you would have a better option. Plus, it has the pen capability with the Go, so you could draw on it and things. Now, if I had artistic talent, that would mean something. But yeah,
that's the spirit.
There you go.
Yeah. I agree.
I'm not happy with this decision. I was hoping they would. I don't think it's that hard to make a Linux version. Now, the Linux community will always go out there and create patches and things to make it work, I'm sure, perfectly fine, like the community always does.
It's like, how dare you not allow us to have this? We're going to make it.
Yeah, I mean, how hard is it to just not include to include a Linux version on here? The Linux community, if they would have reached out, would have helped them even build it, and then you'd have built a bigger following. To me, it's ridiculous.
There's a section where I think there was like a subreddit or something where people were working on this and like the first version, and they found all these kinds of bugs and stuff, and they submitted up to the people who the manufacturers and stuff like that. So they could have just contacted them and get had it ready, and they probably wouldn't even have to do the development to make it work. They could have just asked the community to do it. I agree. It's a massive missed opportunity.
So on to some news. Now, I know sometimes people skip the gaming section because they're not into gaming. We only got 2 articles here, and then we're going to do a news section. So I'm only mentioning that for individuals who've told us that, they're not into the gaming section, which is fine. So, but to kick us off in the gaming area, Valve is going to release Artifact on Linux November 28th. Can I get some hype, people? This is the first Valve game in a long time.
Half-Life 3. So I'm actually really excited that Valve is making a new game for Linux, and they're making it for everything, and then it's going to be supported on Linux. I'm pretty sure day 1, right? And that is awesome. And it's a card game, so I don't care.
The second that it's Valve, it's going to be a AAA game.
It is, yes. That's true.
Massive. Let me tell you something. When I saw Blizzard's Hearthstone, I thought this is the stupidest idea ever. You collect virtual cards, then you strategize with these cards, and you build a deck, and you go and you attack people with it. But unlike Magic or those things where I know there's Magic Online things, but at the time where you had physical decks that you collect that you could trade for real money, I'm like, why would people do this in a digital environment? And then I played Hearthstone, and I was like, oh, that's why. The game's ridiculously fun. Quick sessions that you play with people. You quickly realize how bad you have no strategy and how poor your deck is. But nonetheless, a lot of fun. That's my experience with pretty much every game. It's a trading game. You can trade these virtual cards with other people. You basically build certain decks based on a fighting style you want. It's like customizing a character. And then you go to war with people. And so... Zeb, I don't know. You've played card games like Rummy and...
I was going to say, is this like online Snap?
Sure. What's that?
Well, you get a deck of cards and you put your cards down, and when you get the same card as your colleague has put down, you shout Snap and put your hand on the deck.
That must be a British thing, no?
You're going to break the monitor if you do that.
It kind of sounds like that Pong game where you had those Pongs.
This is a bit reminiscent of like the first Dungeons and Dragons sort of games that came out, where you had to get all your bits and pieces together first, and you used to sit around a table and nah.
Let me tell you something.
It's really, really good though. The graphics.
I challenge you to play on your phone Hearthstone, because it's available on Android and iOS, and see if you enjoy it. Just play it for a good hour, when you got an hour to spare sitting in front of the TV. And I think you'll find yourself actually enjoying it more than you think you will, because I certainly did. I kind of had the same idea on those. But there's one more gaming news item. Michael, what is it?
This is one I am super excited for. Crazy Justice. And
oh my gosh, I am so pumped for this, dude.
I like the name of it, but I also like what they're trying to do. And this is a full, serious Battle Royale game on Linux. And it's going to be free to play. So even that, the Battle Royale part's be free to play. You can play the other, if you want to play the other modes, it's a purchasable thing. But I'm okay with that too. Because probably out of respect for them making this game for Linux, and I'm just going to get the purchasables, even if I don't even play it. If I just play Battle Royale, it doesn't matter,
Absolutely.
because I appreciate it so much.
It's kind of like Ballistic Overkill. You know, Ballistic Overkill charges you nothing. There's no keys to open chests to upgrade your characters, none of that. So what do? I go buy all of the little character skins and stuff just as a way to support the game because I love Ballistic Overkill and I love that it's on Linux. Crazy Justice is doing a massive launch. They're launching on Nintendo Switch, PS4, PC, you know, obviously PC. See, I'm getting into that's what the gaming magazines and stuff, Windows and Linux and Mac OS all at the same time.
Well, they're doing PC correctly. They're doing like the actual personal computers. It's like it
frustrates me when I'm reading Game Informer and it's like works on PC. I'm like, yeah, you're lying. What does that mean? So they're actually, like you said, doing PC. Battle Royale is a big deal for Linux. The most popular game, I think, right now on the planet has to be either Fortnite or what is it? Battle Underground. What is it called?
PUBG, Players Unknown Battlegrounds.
Players Unknown Battleground. Those are the two most popular games right now. You can't really play them on Linux. You can do some stuff through Wine, but with Fortnite, it uses BattleEye because I tried to get it running through Wine to do a video, and BattleEye basically doesn't work within Wine yet, at least I say yet. And because of that, you can't play. But these are very popular games. So Crazy Justice is a new one. And it's coming to Linux, which means people who get addicted to this and play this in mass, if it's good, which I really hope it is, bring a lot of new people to the gaming arena in the Linux world.
Is this going to have that sort of bouncy, choppy, running around motion that's going to give me motion sickness after 20 minutes? Because that's what happens with Ballistic Overkill. I mean, I love the fact that I'm getting chopped to smithereens every 2 seconds and I just respawn and I know the way out of my base cap like the back of my hand. But after about 20 minutes of this bobbing up and down and that motion, it just makes
there are features in a lot of games that allow you to turn off the bobbing, and I want to say it's in Ballistic Overkill, Michael. We're going to have to look to turn off.
Well, I'll have to really look, because if I can turn that off, then I might be able to play for a lot longer.
Which would be awesome, because we've got to take out Rocco. He's just getting way too cocky with the sniper, and we've got to humble him here.
Right. I agree.
But yeah, this may have that. This has got the cartoony a little bit, but not junk graphics. Very good graphics, but the cartoony, bright colored graphics Fortnite has. And maybe it'll have a feature. Hopefully, if someone from the team is listening, they'll turn off or have a feature to turn off the bobbing. Because like you, Zeb, I actually have the same problem. If it bobs around too much, it makes my eyes tired. And
crazy, But what I liked about this game is when you actually shoot at someone, it's a bullet and not a round orange circle.
Yes, it's an actual bullet.
But you can actually see it like a ray trace heading towards where it's going to. So, yeah, this sounds like it could be fun. So I'll definitely give it a go. Yeah. And as per Michael's comments, yes, I'm open to bribes, boys.
Oh, nice. I love it. All right, so now we're going to do a new section that we've added, which will go into our shows going forward, tips and tricks of the week. So we're going to have a software spotlight and a tip that we pick out, and some of these will be easy and some you'll be like, oh, I've always known that, and some you may not know. And in fact, this one sounds easy, but I didn't know it, and I am so happy to now know it because it's made my life a lot easier. What is it, Zeb?
Well, I mean, I discovered this probably about 2 years ago now, because one of the things that Peppermint Linux does is it has everything minimalist, and that includes all of the borders on any windows. Now, how many times have you gone to a particular window, gone to click on the line that denotes it, so your mouse changes, and then you've spent the next 5 minutes getting ready, and then as you click it, it moves off again, so you can never grab the border.
Right.
A very simple, easy trick. Put your mouse near the border where you want to move, hold your finger on the Alt key, right mouse click, and then drag the window to wherever you want to take it. Now, if you do that in the corner, then you can do both options at the same time. But if you just do it on one edge, you can go up and down or left and right. So just to repeat that again, put your mouse anywhere near the window edge that you want, hold down the Alt key, and then right mouse click, hold it down, and drag the window to the new size you want. So no more fiddling around for this 1 pixel edge that you can never get your finger on.
Yeah.
It's so funny after all this time, you've changed my life with this simple thing. I'm one of those ones sitting there trying to inch my mouse perfectly to where it gives me the little arrow in the corner to resize the screen. Hold the Alt key, right click, boom, you can resize it immediately.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and if your window
one-
manager has snapping, you can snap them together pretty easily too.
Mhm. But you're not the only one who didn't know this, Ryan, because I've seen Sudo Reboot struggling an awful lot doing it on his streams, and also English Bob when he's trying to get it so the chat window's there, his virtual machine is over there, and I'm sort of shouting at the machine, "Oh, right mouse click!" And by the time you finish typing it, they're both 30 minutes behind the stream anyway, so they never read what it is I'm trying to tell them. So hopefully they'll watch this. Alt, right mouse click, drag the window to your heart's content.
Now, this doesn't work on every desktop environment. I did test it in Cinnamon because that's what I'm on right now. I know it works in Cinnamon. Michael, was there some others that you know of it doesn't work with?
The last time I tried it in GNOME, it didn't work. The Alt right mouse click doesn't work, but the Alt left mouse click does work, which is the same thing but for moving. So you can move a window really easily that way. That did work, but last time I checked, it doesn't work in the right click. But it has worked for a decade in Plasma.
There you go. All right. Throw it out there, the Plasma thing. So now on to a software spotlight. So I love this program. I don't hear many people talk about it. I am not a fan of Logitech's webcams by any stretch of the imagination, although we're all kind of forced to use them because they're the only player. I'm not a fan because they write nothing for Linux. So you can't, all the features you buy if you get a 922X to remove backgrounds or change contrast and all of that stuff, you have to find another method to do that because Logitech hates me. Us.
Apparently.
Yeah. So there's a program out there called GovCView, G-U-V-C-View. It's a webcam application that lets you go in and change brightness, contrast, saturation, resolution, all of those things for your webcam. I have used it for the Logitech. I have used it for external cams that I have set up, camcorders that I had set up doing my video earlier. So what it does is when you go and you change those settings in GovCView, it also saves them. So when you exit out and say then open OBS or open Zoom, those settings are still there in your Logitech webcam. So the contrast, the brightness, the white noise, all of that still saves within those settings, making it, to me, an invaluable tool because we utilize that so much with podcasts and doing YouTube videos and those type of things.
Oh, yeah.
So GovCView, it's awesome.
Yeah, I started playing with it because when you put it in the show notes, I was like, oh, okay, I've used this before, but only for the most basic features of like displaying a webcam. And then I started playing with it, like, oh, this is way more useful than I thought it was.
Yeah, it's definitely awesome. So that is the end of our show, our first show without our beloved friend Rocco, but he has been hanging out in the Telegram groups and has some more free time to play box. So if you miss him, go check out the Destination Linux Telegram group. And a big thank you to each and every one of you for supporting and watching and listening to the show, even though we're adjusting to the 3-host format here. You guys have done nothing but show love and shout outs and comments and telling us the show must go on. And in fact, right now, we've never had this many patrons sitting in a room watching us do this show live. So that means so much to us that you guys give us that kind of support. So Zeb, how can people get a hold of us?
Yeah, I mean, I know I bang on about it every week, but please remember that you can get back to us and let us know what you think or ask any burning questions. We've got numerous methods. We've got email, which is comments@destinationlinux.org. We've got our telegram, I'm going to say telephone group there, our Telegram group, Discord, Mumble, our website, destinationlinux.org, Google Plus, Twitter, and of course the comments at the end of this video when we post it. And I know I keep saying it, but it really is important because for the last 2 weeks now, we've had 2 excellent emails from users giving us their experience about how they use it, or allowing us, myself and Rocco, to have a little giggle at Ryan's expense with the Honda video. So it really does make up a big part of the show. So keep telling us how you feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember to like that smash button.
Oh my gosh.
And to subscribe if you haven't already. And also, if you this is something interesting, I kind of wanted to just throw it in there. You ever see, like most of the podcasts you listen to, they'll say something like, rate us in your favorite, podcasting app, rate and review and blah, blah, blah. Turns out that's almost impossible. Because they say that because they don't know there's only 3 of those podcast apps you can actually do reviews and ratings. And that's Stitcher, Podcast Republic, and unfortunately iTunes.
There you go.
If you want to do that, feel free to do so, and that's how you can do it at this point.
But we do love those reviews. There was a point on iTunes even where there were 0 reviews. Now we have tons of 5-star reviews out there, which absolutely makes our day. And we are reaching out to the patrons more as we change the format of the show to meet. We're not going to change everything. The heart of the show will always be Destination Linux. But as we make changes because of the 3-host format, we are going to reach out to the patrons to give us advice. And we've put polls out there to get information on when we should release our recordings and make those adjustments. But we appreciate so much your patience with us as we figure out this new stuff here and get things rolling back as usual. So everybody, have a great week, and remember, the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Destination Linux podcast.
Yeah, we did it. Are you recording?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Do I have audio? Maybe.
Does the overlay work?
Yes, the overlay works now. Okay, we're going to do the whole audio testing thing.
Okay. Michael is 30 minutes late as usual. Nothing has changed.
Except we now have somebody else panicking in the top left-hand corner.
Technically, the edited version, I'm going to be on the top right corner, so it's close. And I am panicking. But more importantly, it's 18 minutes late, not 30. Thank you. I did create the web version little port viewer thing. But
What's he talking about?
Who knows? I don't think anything's working over there. If we probably could see his screen,
who knows?
It's
Who
just
cares?
a fatal
Let him say it so he can get done with it and be over.
I feel like he's panicking because his computer's on fire and he's not telling us. And he's like, I don't know if the fire's going to go out on its own or if I should just not say anything.
That's a fair... okay, we'll assume it worked. How about that? There was a couple issues that happened during the stream, but none of them are I can fix all of them. It's just a couple things happened. But...
Like...
well, one time I accidentally scrolled away, so this capture was weird for like half a second.
No, we've never had this many patrons show up. That's pretty awesome.
It's awesome, isn't it, eh? It's
showing
fantastic.
some love right when we need it most.
Yeah,
you know?
I appreciate every one of you who showed up.
And OBS, you see the audio thing going like this?